evening, everybody. It is I don't know what time it is. It's 6:01 p.m. On Tuesday, November 14th. We are in the Nashua North Boardroom, and I am calling this meeting of the Nashua Board of Education Policy Committee to order. Couple of housekeeping things. We're using this session kind of as a work session. It's significantly less formal than a regular board meeting. We still ask people to raise their hands and not speak out of turn. We will have public comments, and there is a sign up at the podium for that. Although it isn't on the agenda, we will have public comments. All right, so who's here? I'm here, Heather Raymond. We have Miss Darling.
Here.
We have Miss Lampier.
Here.
We also have Mr. Claffey. We have Miss Oden. And we have Miss Johnson. Thank you all for coming tonight. We also have Mr. Posca and Dr. Andrade. And then our audience is full, so that's good news. It's exciting to have people here for our committee meeting. It doesn't happen all that often. All right, so I hope everybody was able to access the packet for tonight online. I printed mine out because it is 35 pages of materials and research and data. So if you don't have it, I only have one printed copy, but I'm happy to let people see what they need to see. And I thought we would start by having Mr. Posca kind of give us an overview of what is in this 35 pages.
Thank you, Ms. Raymond. We're here tonight to talk about the middle level policy for the Nashua School District. Over the past year plus, members of the Middle School Steering Committee have gone through a very thorough process to kind of examine our practices in a variety of ways, including our middle level policy. And it's come into a culmination of making a recommendation to the superintendent and the Board of Education regarding kind of some next steps. So utilizing some of the information that not only they've gone through, and I really want to commend the Middle School Steering Committee for everything that they embarked upon. We've had a lot of really strong conversations about what best practice should be and about what middle level education should look like in the Nashua School District. And, you know, it was emotional, it was passionate, and we did, you know, there was a lot of research involved, and I think it's allowed that group to come close and to have kind of some respectful disagreements, but it's also allowed us to come to conclusion about what we believe is best practice for us going forward. As part of this next steps, we put together a lot of information in this packet about how we got here. I want to thank the middle school principals, particularly Ms. Coffey and Mr. Falzerano, for their input in talking about what the leveling process looked like in Nashua over the past 20 plus years. From about 2003 to 2020, the students were grouped into three levels: honors, honors, extension, and foundation. These levels were based upon determinations from teacher recommendations from the previous year at the including elementary schools. There was some data involved in this in looking at some of the iReady scores, some state testing, NECAP scores, grades, and behaviors. This evolved into having not only all content, from having all content staff involved in this, to really just English and math, because it was thought that those would kind of direct the rest of the conversations. One level didn't determine whether you were in that level for all your other classes. So it was possible for a student to be at one level for one content level and another level for another content. For example, a student could be in honors for math, but maybe found extensions for social studies. So it wasn't all encompassing. But it was a challenge to do that, because that's really more of a junior high model as opposed to a middle school model. So it made some of the scheduling a challenge at the middle school level. Teachers were asked to do this every year, so it wasn't something that just happened, you were done once in middle school, it was done over the course of it. Data demonstrated that special education students and some of our ELL students were often placed in foundation levels because it was felt that they needed a slower pace. Around 2015, there was some subtle changes made, and that came from central office. In grade 5, teachers were asked to rank students above grade level, on grade level or below grade level. Then the middle schools utilized this information along with other assessments to kind of, once they got their students in grade 6, to assess that and then regroup based upon what they saw in front of them. Around 2020, with COVID and everything else hit from 2020 to 2023, the process changed a little bit due to COVID. It was a challenge to schedule with having some students in person, hybrid, et cetera. So we obviously went through all those challenges. Over the last couple years, it was decided that we were going to schedule using at least a minimum of 2 levels. And we've been consistent with that to stay consistent with the policy. I do want to know that we still had world language recommendations from grade 7 to grade 8 that were utilized at the middle school level. We'd love to see world language offerings and foreign language offerings be offered to a variety of our students. So this was part of the process. I think algebra recommendations were also part of this. So from grade 7 and grade 8, there is a placement assessment utilized that students can take to help determine math placement in grade 8. Because currently our students in grade 8 can earn high school credit by taking algebra and some of our foreign language, either French or Spanish. So that's a quick overview of kind of the leveling over the last 20 some odd years in Nashua, based upon kind of some of the feedback and the research we've done. So one of the things we've talked about prior to the meeting is, as we go through, if there are any questions from the committee, we can jump in here. So I'm going to see it as a natural break to talk about leveling, if there's any questions about this at this time.
So I was here 6 years ago when the last time we talked about leveling, and we kind of punted it. We said, let's let some people look at this, and the steering committee was kind of the natural spot. Can you back up and tell us how, who gets involved in the middle school steering committee, and how teachers and are there administrators involved in the steering committee, and how people are chosen to be in that committee?
Yes, I think over the course of the last several years, I think with the turnover in central office administration and with COVID, it's been a challenge, and it's been a lot of start and stop. And I think I can speak to that over the last 3 years. I really meant what I said when I was kind of identifying what the middle school steering committee has done over the year plus, because it's been, most of that committee has been the same since the beginning of COVID. So we've tried to keep it somewhat consistent to have these conversations. And I think, there were people were asked who wanted to be on it. I think we've stayed, and there were recommendations put out, or we put an email out and asking people who want to be part of that. I think what we saw has been somewhat consistent over the last 3 years. I can't speak prior to that, but I think, it's a testament to the group that has been part of that over the last 3 years. We have lost some people to attrition, but again, we've kind of stayed true to who that group is, so we can be consistent with the conversations that we've had.
Right, and so you said an email went out, so people volunteered?
Yes, when we kind of made, knowing we were going to the middle school steering committee, I believe it was last fall, we knew this is kind of where the rubber hits the road with all the decisions to come up with McCarthy coming on board and over, a little over a year. So this was going to be, a significant amount of work that was put into place. So making sure that those staff who were committed to it before were willing to commit to it as well. If there was any new staff, I think there may have been 1 or 2 other people who may have been added on at that time. But for overall, the members have been consistent over the last 3 years or so.
And so they were tasked with looking at our middle education policy, which was updated last in 2002. They're also looking at anything else having to do with the middle schools? Because we're changing how many students and staff, and are they working on any of that?
There's a lot of things that we're talking about here. And I think how it started out is I think we had to identify what is our philosophy about middle school here in Nashua? There was a book study done regarding the American Association of Middle Level Educators book, This We Believe, which was our foundational resource to kind of guide some of these conversations. We looked at a variety of other research and articles regarding middle school, middle level education. And we had a conversation about, does this identify who we are as a district? As we get into some of the other information that was shared within the packet, I think I can kind of connect some of those dots of how it all ties in. But again, this was a lot of emotional conversation about what this is all about to get to this idea, because I think this conversation will then kind of identify some of the next steps that we have to talk about, regarding what our middle schools consist of. And I think this group is prepared to have some of these conversations, but at this time, this is one of the first. This is the first big domino that has to be addressed in order to have some future conversations about next steps.
Okay. All right. If anybody here, member of the committee or guest of the committee, has a question, just raise your hand and I'll call on you and Mr. Posca can answer. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you very much. I don't have a voice really.
Oh,
I'm not
no.
sick or contagious. I was at the doctor yesterday. This was all done. We've asked for volunteers at the middle school. I don't want this to turn out to be like the class rank and the weighted GPA, that parents haven't had a chance to understand what could happen here. That we're putting this forward, the board's going to vote on it. We're going to have a discussion with them, vote on it. We're going to hear testimony, from people in the audience, whether they're for it, against it, teachers. Have we done any surveys to the parents to make this whole thing transparent?
We have not done surveys with the parents.
Okay, we didn't do the same thing when it came out, basically, for the weighted GPA and the class rank, because they were stunned that we had a meeting and then we voted on it, and then parents came in later on asking for us to reverse everything. I think parents have to have an idea what is going to happen if we take the leveling away. And we start grouping all the kids in the classroom. I spoke to an advocate. I spoke to Ms. Coffey today. I'm weighing everything, because this isn't just a light decision that you just like pulling a rabbit out of the hat. This is going to make significant changes. And I also asked, is this going to be a pilot program, or are we just going to implement this and hope for the best or hope for the worst? I don't know. I'm nervous about this. It is a big change. And it's not something that you can take lightly. There's a lot of students and teachers, everybody that's going to be affected by this. And if we're going to do this, we have to make sure that our teachers and our paras are completely trained, that when you have ELL students, you have special ed students, you have students that are behind in certain subjects, that they're going to be able to get the help that they need. And I've never been crazy about leveling, because I was the one who got rid of level 4 before I left the board in 2001, because I felt that was terrible. But this is going to be a big all-around change for everybody at the middle school level. So I hope this isn't just going to be as a policy change. We send it off to the full board for our next meeting, and then the changes are made. I hope this is going to be a long discussion, and we start getting parents involved, because their students who are in the middle school or coming into the middle school are going to understand exactly what this change means for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I think your comments are important, and I think that as we go through the packet, we're going to look at how long this discussion has been happening in Nashua and what the test scores are telling us about whether our kids are on level or below level, or if any are actually above level. And I was surprised and disappointed at some of the numbers that are in the packet. So to me, it's clear that doing things the same way that we've done them for 20 years is going to give us the same results that we've been getting. So I'd really like to hear, I don't know what the options are, but I'd like to hear what our options are. So.
Well, if I could just continue to go through some of the other information in the packet. So I think when we, as part of this process, I was also asked to investigate, what do other districts in the area do? How do they schedule the middle school? So within the packet, I think we looked at about 9 or 10 other districts, close by. And I think the vast, considering all of them, do not level the middle school level. I would say that's, from my previous experience in Massachusetts, that's also consistent with what we see in Massachusetts. There's no leveling that occurs at the middle level. I think, there's an article that Ms. Raymond's referring to about the conversation was had about 2014. I think there is an opportunity for a level to start happening, when we start to get high school. I think that's when students really start choosing different paths to go down and things change. Having this opportunity for all students to have access and opportunity to all the content standards at the middle school level is so vitally important. And I still think we're honoring kind of the opportunities for some of our students to have opportunities to extend themselves with math offerings and foreign language is consistent with what we're doing. In fact, that's similar to what goes on in Londonderry, which is what noted with some of the research we've done. So I think we need to make sure we're giving our students the opportunities who are ready for some advanced opportunities to push themselves to those next level. So that was some of the information that's in the packet as well. Additionally, there was some information from the Association of Middle Level Educators book about their philosophy, kind of the overall philosophy about this, we believe. So I provided that in there, and I think when you look at what they're identifying as what their middle school philosophy is, it really does kind of dovetail nicely with our middle level policy, with the exception of leveling. Everything else is very, very similar, but they are opposed to the idea of, middle school philosophy is opposed to the leveling, whereas we're including it in there. So I think, when we as a committee or when the middle school steering committee was reviewing this policy, there was a commitment to kind of recommitting ourselves to what our middle level policy is and what we want it to be. And I think we're going to have a little bit more discussion about what that could be going forward. But there's an opportunity here, and I think Ms. Johnson brings up a good point. What is the benefit for all of our students for having this in there? I think it's an opportunity for all of our students to have access and opportunity to those grade level standards. And I do believe that means we as a district need to provide some opportunities for professional development for our staff regarding differentiation to support our staff as they're meeting the needs of all the students who are in front of them. So I think there is a connection of what, that middle level policy. It's certainly not all bad, but I think there's an opportunity to make it truly what we think it should be as we go forward.
Can you talk a little bit about the statistics that were in the packet? I'm going to skip over. I did have, if anybody wants it, there's an article from the Telegraph talking about back in 2014, our levels were noted as an area of concern because if we looked at poverty in the city, 70% of our kids in our foundations level were under the poverty line, whereas only 36% of all students were at or below the poverty line back then. And it really tracked that the honors classes, it was 17%. So there was a data trend, and I actually looked all the way back to 2008. And back when we had Superintendent Conrad, part of his interview process, he talked about how in the middle school level, poverty was impacting student performance. And there was a correlation between high poverty students ending up in foundations levels and low poverty students ended up in honors levels. And that's, I think, when he suggested making that change to how we evaluate who goes where. So I understood that. But then as I kept going, there was a memo in here from May of 2022 entitled Leveled Learning Student Outcomes. And there's a lot of dense statistics, there's charts, and I didn't find it super accessible for the layperson to understand it. So I was hoping you could go through it and kind of explain.
Sure. So this was a kind of an analysis that came from the Office of the Assistant Superintendent. It was done the year we returned from COVID. And I think there was some concerns, there was a lot of concerns, there still are a lot of concerns, but I think it was a deeper dive into as we were trying to, reschedule students with COVID, I think it allowed the district to, at least, the middle school to really ask the questions about, how are we leveling? Is it working for all of our students as students came back and we were dealing with a variety of other issues? So as we got into this, the Office of the Assistant Superintendents, along with our data analyst, started, asking some of the questions, and this was a result of some of the work. So to Ms. Raymond's point, I'm going to go through some of the information and the data that was in that report. So they started looking at state assessment scores, and they started looking at level of proficiency. And they started looking at the level of proficiency from about 2016 through 2021. We've added updated state assessment scores that bring us to 2023. As you get into this, and again, to speak to it, I think what we see as we study the proficiency level, starting with the third grade scores and then going all the way to eighth grade, the level of proficiency on the standardized test, and this goes I believe it was the kneecap testing that then transferred over to the SIS testing. So still, we'll just call it the state standardized testing. Our students at the elementary level were scoring higher levels of proficiency, and then there was a dip in proficiency as students reached the middle school level. And that was consistent in the state testing in math and English. The science score is only given, the science test is only given in grades 5 and 8, so it's a relatively smaller sample size. But overall, if you look at the proficiency scores of all of our students during that time, you see the significant difference in levels of proficiency. As students enter the middle school, there's a significant dip. So to put into layman's terms, if you follow that third grade and you look at the level of proficiency, you see that it peaks out at 56% in 2019 for some of our math scores, but yet we don't see a proficiency level in math of 56% at any time during middle school. That's one of the pieces of information that's there. That then gets into kind of looking at it breaks it down. So overall in fifth grade, you have a level of proficiency of about 58%. Then when you get to 2017 in sixth grade, it goes to 45%. 2018, that's 49%. And then in eighth grade, it's 37%. And that's looking at some of our ELA scores over that time. So you see kind of a decline in proficiency in those state testing scores at that time. And then again, when you look at it for math, you see the same idea. Again, proficiency in 2016 in fifth grade was about 40%. In 2017, in sixth grade, it's 32%. 2018, and again, for whatever reason, there's a little bit of a blip in both ELA and math in seventh grade. But then there's another dip starting in eighth grade, and that's consistent in both ELA and math over the course of that time.
This was the same cohort of students, so it's the same kids, their fifth grade scores, their sixth grade, their seventh, and their eighth, not a different class each year.
Correct. It's just following one cohort. And again, that was one of the challenges, is trying to kind of how do we look at this data? So the determination was made to follow one class. So this is the example that was demonstrated. And I think that follows up in kind of some of the next data when you look at the detailed student level cohort analysis. And again, a little bit more challenging to follow. I agree with your assessment that, what is going on here. So in essence, what they did was they looked at a cohort of students in 2018 and 2019, okay, in seventh and eighth grade. In order to be consistent, they had to, they wanted to make sure the students took all the same state assessments, and they stayed in the same level over the course of that time. So if Heather Raymond, was considered honors in grade 7, grade 8, she was and she took all the state assessments, her data was included in this report. So they're trying to compare apples to apples with what we're looking at. And then in addition to this, on the other part of that graph, you're looking at what their, the average level of their grade was during that time. Okay, so when you're talking about those state standards. So what we're seeing is that you're seeing, again, a negative shift in proficiency. The level of proficiency is declining over that time in middle school. But at the same time, if you look at the far side, on the far right, it's demonstrating they are making effective academic progress based upon their grades. So here we have a state assessment that's tied to our standards where we're not performing as well as we would hope, but yet our students are still doing well based upon how they're performing in school.
So the state assessment is saying proficient, below proficient, or wait, proficient, approaching proficient, or below proficient. And we're having a large number who are not proficient, but they're still getting A's and B's in school.
Correct.
Okay, so we have a disconnect between our grading standards and what the SAS is asking us to meet.
We could be, I think that's, as we look at this information, I think it's what is the story that's going on. I think it allows us to ask the question is what is the story? I think it's a deeper conversation of what is occurring.
Everyone else also has like the confused face on. Do people have articulate questions yet or want to keep going? Okay, go ahead.
A number of the teachers, as we're all coming to understanding all of the information before us, a lot of the teachers are smiling and nodding as if this is not new information to them, which, big surprise to us, it is not new for them. Is there anybody in the audience that has anything that they want to add to what we've been learning? Like, we're just now learning, like, the SAS testing and the disconnect between the SAS testing and the curriculum that we're teaching. Is that only in one subject? Is that every subject? Is this something you guys have been advocating for?
I think, so I have two thoughts on this. I don't want to so Mr. Posca and Dr. Andrade, like, we pay them to be on the spot and we make them come here and answer questions publicly all the time. I don't know that I want to force teachers into that same position.
I'm just asking, not forcing. If anybody is brave enough.
I think there are people who are willing, who want to tell their stories, and from both sides. I think, it was Ms. Raymond said, this is a working meeting. We're going to hear both sides of the story, and I think it's important we hear both sides of the story. So I think when people come up, I think we'll hear, everyone's own personal narrative about what they see and what their experience consists of. Right now, I think what I'm trying to do is just demonstrate, here's some data that we have, and I think we'd be foolish not to at least kind of, as you're doing, raising that eyebrow about what's going on as far as what this story is really telling us.
Right. Okay.
So I think it's a great point, and just want to reiterate that, as Mr. Posca said, like, this is the first kind of conversation. So we know in the middle school steering committee, there's probably about 14 things on our list that we have to talk about, and grading is one of them. So team scheduling, professional development, differentiation, we know, like, we are not going to have a transformational kind of change overnight. This is going to take time. So, I mean, just even the reference to the article in 2014, like this has been a conversation going on for a little while, and we're not going to unpeel like everything back in the next 6 months. But how do we give each other kind of grace, involve people, have those conversations on what does our middle school philosophy look like and feel like on a daily basis from a student lens, from a teacher's lens, from a parent's lens. Again, it's just, this isn't going to magically change between now and Open and McCarthy. This is going to be a lot of conversations, a lot of input, but this is our first conversation on, I think, really the document. What do we believe at the middle school level? And then how do we go forward supporting the changes that we come up with collaboratively? Again, I think it's bigger than just a superintendent recommendation. So I'm really happy the middle school steering committee, most of them are here tonight, but it's the empowerment and the ownership, right? It's bigger. I think Ms. Johnson said, this is a bigger conversation that is bigger than one person. again, and like we need to be thoughtful. And so what are the things that we have to speed up and what are the things that we have to slow down? So we're really having those conversations with the middle school steering committee because we have to have input. We need to have buy-in and we need to have empowerment. And it's just not one person, superintendent, saying this is the way we're doing business and think it's going to fly. It's,
Nashua.
right, it's just no. It has to be a collaborative, and this is hard. This is not a technical challenge where we're just going to make a decision like buy something and it's going to change things. We are really our first conversation with the middle school steering committee is what is our shared mission and vision? What's our values? What does it look like? And really come to the agreement and having conversations from there, which is harder because we can have all the data and present it. But at the end of the day, it's like it comes down to our belief system. And that's where the harder conversations on this is the way we've been doing it for a number of years. So we all have experience with it. And so when we're going to change something, that's a lot harder. And we have to, again, empower people to have a voice, to have ownership in the process. And then as a district and as a board, how do we support those changes moving forward? So this is going to be a lot of conversations, not only in the next 6 months, but kind of moving forward on how do we support the decisions that are coming forward.
Thank you. I also want to point out this is the policy committee, so we can talk about the overarching policy and like our philosophical goals and stuff. But I think it sounds like as we're looking at some of this data, like my mind immediately went to grading, your mind immediately went to curriculum, and we have a curriculum committee so that as the middle school steering committee moves forward, hopefully if they have curriculum specific changes that they want, that would then go to curriculum because we can't do that in this committee, right? That is way outside my wheelhouse. But Mr. Coffey?
Hi, Mr. Posca, if I may. How much debate was there within the steering committee about eliminating leveling in math?
I think there was a strong, I'm going to give you the overall answer and then going to get a little more granular. I think as a steering committee, they voted, I think it was 22-1 to eliminate levels. However, I think there is a strong belief that there is still a need for algebra in grade 8, much like I think there's still a need for an opportunity for students to advance themselves with foreign language instruction if they're ready for it at that time.
Go ahead, Ms. Brown.
Could I just,
Wait, Mr. Coffey, then Ms. Brown.
was there a vote on math? Eliminating math leveling, was there a vote?
No, the vote is to continue with our practice of what we're doing in grade 8 and give students the opportunity to participate in algebra. But again, we're talking about the other grades, eliminate level overall, but we'll continue with our current practice of how we're offering students the opportunity to advance themselves with math. Am I answering you now? Thank you.
That's actually a really good segue to exactly what I was going to ask. So with the complete elimination of middle school leveling, my concern is primarily in math and the accessibility to content curriculum that prepares the students to the foundations they need to be able to take Algebra 1, which is a class that yields high school credit, so they need to be at least proficient to probably above 7th grade level content for the most part. And I actually recognize the importance and the value of a heterogeneous classroom. And even in math, particularly for the elementary school, it gives students opportunities to work collaboratively, and there will generally be like models of the work that other students can look at. And I think that there's some real value in that. However, if we do have students that are in need of more of a challenge, how will teachers both identify those students and then have the time to make sure that those students get access to the supports they need in an unleveled class? I'm wondering if eventually we'll end up with a discrepancy between families who can seek out outside help, tutors, VLACs, and those kind of supports to get their students up to the level that they're able to take an Algebra 1 class, and the students who don't have those means, or students who just don't even have the knowledge that that kind of thing is available.
I think Similar to that question, I think to what Ms. Raymond said, I think there is a need for us as a district to identify the supports needed to support our staff with differentiation and meet the needs of the students wherever they are. I think that, if we're talking about what are the concerns that came out of the middle school steering committee, that is a significant concern. I think we're recognizing that if this is the path we're going down, and I think Dr. Andre had referenced this, we still have a lot of work to do. This isn't just a one and done. And that means we need to identify those support and and the professional development that's necessary to support the needs of all of our students. I think right now what we're seeing at this time is I don't think we're providing all of our students that access and opportunity to these content and these standards. And that's the direction we need to at least identify now. And then the next step is to provide that professional development to support them in the classroom setting.
So if I can just add on to that. So so we're thinking about the future of not having access and opportunity based on curriculum decisions. If we're heterogeneous in seventh grade, that students in seventh grade may be missing some standards to get them ready for algebra 1 in eighth grade. So I think of what are we currently doing for students in foundations and extensions classes that get them ready for algebra 1? Do we have, right? Those students have a pathway? If they're in sixth grade or seventh grade in an extensions classroom, they don't have currently access to those standards or families with the resources. So we're worried about the future, but our current practice, are we identifying those standards that the students need, the non-negotiables in seventh grade to say, I am ready for algebra 1 if I'm not in an on-level class? Right, so we're concerned about the future, but our current practice is, I think, prohibiting students to get into that current algebra 1. So I think we need to be cognizant of moving forward our curriculum work, looking at our non-negotiables of what does that curriculum look like so a student is prepared to be successful in algebra 1. But I'm also looking at, let's not forget, our current pathway is limiting students in sixth and seventh grade to get into that algebra 1 class because it's just not this support's in place for a student to move up 1 or 2 levels. So I don't know if I answered
No,
it.
you did actually, and I actually agree with you. I think that that's something that's wrong with our current practice is having, if a student has above grade level proficiency in math but below grade level in reading, why are we having them in the on a team that keeps them limiting their own abilities in certain content areas? And I think ideally I would see a model where there would be flexibility within the teams. And I know that lends a lot of difficulty to the guidance department, but I think it's worth it to meet kids where they are within those content areas.
Can I ask you to oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to go, Ms. Lampier?
I actually just have more of a comment and a question, which is that the numbers here are like horrible. That 8% of the foundation's kids were proficient in ELA, and 12% of foundation's kids were proficient in math, and we're not serving those kids at all, and to see the difference between what the foundation's kids are capable of and are proficient in and what the honors kids are proficient in, it's so inequitable, it's so glaring that I came in here tonight and I was like, I don't even know why we need to have a conversation about this. I mean, it's clear what we need to do. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Kind of piggybacking on that, can you tease out for us a little bit what the difference is? Because our curriculum, and you included some curriculum in here as an example, but I know our curriculum isn't foundations curriculum, extensions curriculum, honors curriculum. So like in high school, if you take, honors algebra 2, the curriculum is actually different than foundations algebra or, a different, the levels of math have different curriculum, but it's not in middle school. So what is the so what are our honors kids getting for instruction that is different than the extensions and foundations kids?
When we had that discussion at the middle school steering committee, I think overall what came out is the pace of the class is the difference. And I think that led to some discussion is, how does that pace then, do all the standards then get covered for all of our students? And I think there was some concern whether or not that does or does not happen. But overall, the conversation and the comment was about the pace of the class.
That leads me to wonder if it's pacing, how much earlier in the year are the honors kids completing their curriculum and their standards for the year? Like, do we have kids who don't have stuff to do in May and June while the other two levels catch up? Like an AP class, AP classes you finish in May because the test is in May, and then you do like fun educational activities for the rest of the year.
I don't believe so. I mean, I think there's certainly still engaging with the curriculum, but I think it led to the kind of a conversation is how do we provide all of our students access to all of the standards over the course of the year. So I think it's a conversation, and I think it's a challenging conversation to have as far as what the difference was, because I think there was some kind of debate on what that looks like, and I think that may have looked a little bit different in some varied classrooms across the district at the middle school level.
Okay, thank you. Did I see Miss Oden's hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, a few years back, algebra was an issue at the high school for those kids that needed it. And I believe it was James Graham, the math teacher here, and somebody else worked on developing an algebra program for those students that were having difficulty. It might be wise to see if that program is still going on and how successful it is, because I remember it being addressed here at North. I'm not sure if it was for the CTE program directly, but I do remember the conversations, and I have never seen an update on it. So that might be wise to look into the math that was going on here at the algebra here at the high school.
Is that robot algebra? Is that the class?
They were looking at a new way to teach it, and I don't know how successful it was. Maybe I was off the board then, but I think it's worthwhile to look into that.
Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I just want to piggyback on Ms. Lampier's question. If our students are in foundation, it's a slower pace than advanced, right? Okay. Why would their scores be so low in the classroom when we would be working with them more closely to bring them up? So we're asking now, and then this is just from what I'm listening to, we're asking to remove kids from leveling, put them all, group them into heterogeneous grouping, so there's a homogeneous, put them in there, and then what's going to happen if we have more kids falling behind from that foundation area, and they're not keeping up because even with the grouping, they can't keep up in the classroom? How are we going to work with this? It all sounds good in theory. I've had kids that fell behind. I had one child that went into Elm Street Middle School that was 4 years behind in reading because we had the whole language. Back then, that was in the 90s, okay? And we had all this leveling, but it came out of elementary school like that, with the 4 years behind in reading. And then no matter what we did, we couldn't really catch him up because you're that far behind. So you have a kid that's far behind. Now you're taking away the leveling. Now you're mixing them all up in the classroom. We're going to have, like, from what I read, like little groups. And that's why I spoke to people and an advocate today, basically, what do you do when you have students that get this far behind? I think the first thing you have to ask here before we start changing, why, if we have students in foundation, are they falling that far behind? What are we not doing in the curriculum here that this has happened? That's the first thing. The extension, that's the middle. I go back to when I was on the board the last time and I talked about level fours. The kids that are in the middle really kind of go, because they kind of go with the flow almost like. It's the kids on the top that they'll be able to really pass and surpass everybody because that's where they are. It's the ones that are on the lower tier that we can't get them going to be in the middle or get to the top. So if we can't do this at this point in time, how are we going to get it when we group everybody together? That's my concern. And so, when you start reading the numbers, when I copied everything at my house, I forgot Thursday to get the papers. I didn't get all the numbers. I was looking at it on my phone and listening to Ms. Lampier. That would be my first question, is that before we start doing this, we need to make sure that those students in foundation, that at that level, that we have a good enough program that they're not falling that far behind, because I don't want to see our students, by the time they get to ninth grade, they're now so far behind. How do you catch them up? Then we have the behavioral problem. We have them wanting to drop out. And then we didn't service the kids at all. So I think that's a very big, important piece here that I think we're missing somewhere in here.
Ms. Johnson, that was my exact concern 6 years ago when this came, and we said, instead of moving forward, let's send it to a committee, because if we're not giving those students, for me, if we're not giving those students access to the whole curriculum, then we're not meeting their needs, right? And right now, I'm showing, to me, in my brain, extensions should be on level, right? And honors should be above grade level, and foundations should be slightly below grade level. And that's not what our test scores say. So something is off. And I appreciate the willingness of everybody to come here and talk about, like, what do we do about it? And I don't think there's one answer, unfortunately.
So if I just may, and we've been having this conversation really K through 12, whether it's at the elementary, middle school, high school, for the year and a half that I've been here, and I know, going back. So what is our tier 1 instruction? I know at the curriculum subcommittee, we have the conversations of what's our tier 1? What's our system? And so almost to the point of, we don't know what our tier 1 guaranteed and viable curriculum is at the middle school. And so how do you differentiate if we don't have a system built, right? And so what does extension looks like? What does foundations look like if we don't have a tier 1? And Dr. Safdie talks about this, Mr. Posca talks about it, but again, pre-K through 12, what's our guaranteed and viable curriculum around tier 1 instruction based on standards? And so almost to our point is, like, we keep on going along of doing what we're doing, but do we have models of strong and weak work? What does 7th grade ELA look like? A writing benchmark look like? Are we clear in that? And so if we're not clear in models of strong and weak work and learning targets and being deep in what the standards are looking for, then how do we help kids get there? What's the scaffolding look like? So again, what do we want for the non-negotiables in I'm just picking on 7th grade, for a student to be successful? But right now, again, what we're figuring out in the middle school steering committee, the one thing that we're consistent about at the middle school level is being inconsistent. It's just like, you ask a rhyme or reason, and we get one answer, one school's doing another, but really, what is our guaranteed and viable curriculum at tier 1? What are those standards? But right now, again, like, if you're asking what's the curriculum in foundations, it's hard to find. And so what are you teaching at that level, and why is it different? It's pacing, we go slower, we go faster, but what are the non-negotiables? What does student work look like, the difference between foundations, extension, and honors? Are there different expectations? I mean, we can go further in the report, but we can see what the conduct looks like in the referrals to the office. So I think we have to go back. And again, this is a lot of work that goes back to it's based on standards in student work, and how do we differentiate on that? But we need to know what is our tier. We have to build our tier 1 system and have guaranteed or access and opportunity for all students with the necessary supports. So in order for a student to actually make that progress, we need to be able specific in that intervention to take a kid from a 1 to a 2 and a 2 to a 3 and a 3 to a 4. How do they progress? What's the difference between the levels? We're just not there yet, and we have to build that. And that's some of the longer work, again, around a tier 1 core instruction. And we're talking about leveling when we're not strong on our core. So we're intervening on interventions. We're not going to raise our system forward if we don't have a solid tier 1 core curriculum. So it's a lot of work, but we need to know, what does good work look like in 7th grade, in 6th grade, in 8th grade, in all the subjects. We need those models.
Is that fair?
I just wanted to say that, when I was in high school, I was in mostly honors classes, and I did all the extra classes I could, and I ended up I ran out of classes to take. So I ended up in classes that were more like the ones my sisters took, like electives, but they were electives that were filled with the kids that were in like the foundations levels. And the behavior in those classes was not what I was used to. The kids were kind of wild because they knew that the teacher didn't expect anything from them. And the teacher were teaching in a way where they were assuming that the kids weren't really going to understand anything challenging. And the whole time I was in school, my sisters weren't really into school. They didn't care about it. And I was like, I don't understand. Why don't they care about school? School is so interesting. It's so fun. You learn so much. And then I was in these classes and I was like, oh my God, no wonder they're not interested. They're not learning anything. They're surrounded by people that don't want to be there. And that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of good reasons to get rid of the leveling. But one of the reasons is that, if you're in a classroom filled with kids that aren't paying attention, you're not going to say, well, they're not paying attention, but I'm going to. You're going to be like the other kids. You want to be the same as the other kids when especially in middle school. But if you're in a classroom where it's mixed and some kids aren't paying attention and some kids are really into it, then maybe you'll choose to be like the kids that are more into it. The kids should be exposed to different ways of behaving in a class. So I just think that's really important.
And I just want to, just for the adults, our teachers, our paraeducators, all the adults working in our schools come to work every day with the best interests of kids. And this is what makes it really hard. No one comes to work saying, I'm gonna do harm today to kids, right? So it's just like, we know our teachers have the best interests of kids. And this is what makes it really hard, is, again, like if I'm teaching a foundations class, an extensions class, we know our teachers are doing they come with the best interest of kids. And so that's what just makes it, and this is what we've been doing it for 20 years or 30 years this way. And it's hard. There's a lot of questions. And how do you change the system? So, and again, that's what makes it, as Mr. Posca said, a lot more emotional, because everyone is doing their best they can and always have students' best interest in mind. And this is, again, how do you change the system, raise expectations? And we're dealing with students. What happens if it doesn't work? Did I fail that kid? And nobody wants to go home to say, I did wrong by Miss Johnson today. I'm not like, right? I did wrong by a kid today, right? Nobody wants that feeling. We all take our jobs very seriously. And as educators, we're perfectionists. We don't want to go forward unless we know it's going to be right. And that's sometimes hard. But again, I just want to publicly say, all the adults have the best interest for the kids.
The thing is that this system that we have then is not just failing the kids, it's also failing the teachers.
Yeah. So
I
I
think,
don't disagree. Thank
right,
you.
I definitely think that one of the things that's come out of this is that we as a district need to do a better job of supporting our teachers and giving them quality professional development that gives them the skills that they need for 21st century teaching, right? We can't just have them graduate from college and then exist in a vacuum where we're like throw substandard PD at them. That's not helpful. So the last question that I had on kind of some of the data in here, and there's a lot in here about conduct reports, but is about the Department of Justice report. I know I was hoping that we would have had that presentation by now. Their last report wasn't favorable, and so we're going to get a lot of information about some changes that they are asking us to do K through 12. I know Manchester was in the news 2 years ago. They were required by the DOJ to unlevel because of some systemic racial disparities in their levels. I think Nashua also has some systemic racial disparities in our levels. And so my question is, has the DOJ specifically asked us to do this?
Not at the middle school. Again, I think the DOJ is asking us, what does our tier one instruction look like? And access and opportunity for all students. So they did not specifically say at the middle school, you have to unlevel classes. But I think to Ms. Olympia's point, like, we shouldn't be reactive. Like, we know that we need to be taking these proactive steps. So, but it wasn't one of their recommendations, like, to take this action, so, which I give our middle school steering committee in this community a lot more credit for, of really embarking on this, as opposed to, we are doing this because the DOJ said we have to do this. We are doing this because it's the right conversation for our community and our students.
Mr. Posca, did you have anything else?
No, I think we've said a lot. I think, we have a lot of people here who have been waiting patiently. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and to have this discussion. But I think I think this conversation just generates how emotional and how passionate we are about, wanting to do what's best for us, our staff, and our students here in Nashua.
Thank you. So I just want to bring everyone's attention to the actual policy and the changes. So if we go over the policy, some of the changes that are not interesting is we changed from numerical to the letter format. We also added bullets and ABC, et cetera, because that's the new format that we've been using for the last 15 years. So the main changes to the policy are striking out the phrase leveling students for instructional purposes. Then I have some questions about whether or not we're doing some of the things on the policy as it is. So A is team teaching. I know we do that because I've had kids in the middle school. B is interdisciplinary planning. Do we have interdisciplinary planning currently?
I think we may have pockets of it, but it's not a practice that's consistently put into play.
C is block scheduling. We have 7 periods, right? Like we had back in 1992 when I was in 7th grade in junior high.
That's correct.
Okay.
But to that, we do have common planning time for middle school staff.
Okay. Are you looking to, as part of this, change the daily schedule? I know there was discussion, oh my gosh, like in 2009 about adding block scheduling and doing a study block and stuff. If we approved the policy, and just to be clear, we only send it to the full board from here. So if the full board then approved it, would this result in like changing into block scheduling for next year?
Not necessarily. I think there will be further discussion coming from the middle school steering committee about, again, based upon this practice and if this is our philosophy, what's the best way we can best serve students going forward?
Okay. Because I know, it's been in there since 2002, but we don't do it. Small group teacher relationships, I think we do that, right?
Yes.
Parents as active partners, engaging the family as partners. I know Elm Street had a big thing, before COVID, where they were having like family nights and they had this brochure. Did that get lost in the COVID shuffle?
I think a little bit. I think, overall, when the middle school steering committee reviewed this policy, I think it gave us pause to kind of recommit, us as a committee, as a district, to kind of to put a point of emphasis on what this policy consists of. Because I think, again, I can only speak to kind of, the last 3 years. I think it's been a lot of changes over the last 3 years. And I think many of us want to get back to what this is all about. And I think that was but I think there was acknowledgement that this is, to Dr. Andre's point before, we're consistently inconsistent with a lot of practices right now. And I think this is an opportunity for us to become more consistent.
F is increased accountability and commitment to routine program evaluation by using a variety of measures, including achievement scores, enhanced attendance, and improved discipline, as well as authentic measures of student performance. I think this is something we've been doing. And
it's an opportunity for us to kind of reevaluate, what is that data telling us, and how can we have, based upon that data, what are the adjustments we should be making?
And then when Mr. Posca and I met, we added a paragraph G, and that paragraph states, students in 8th grade may take advanced courses and apply the credit of those courses towards high school graduation, provided the course demonstrates content requirements consistent with related high school courses, and the student achieves satisfactory standards of performance. School board policies relative to assessment, mastery, and competency shall apply. and the high school principal shall approve the coursework and credit prior to the student enrolling in the class in order for such credit to be applied towards high school. And so previously, we've had the practice, I don't know how long, it's been at least 6 or 7 years of having algebra and languages. So this codifies the practice of having certain high school classes. And it doesn't list which high school classes, because it's my hope that we don't limit them, that we can expand. And then there's a couple of legal references regarding the laws that were passed in 2014 that allow us to do that. So
That's correct.
that's new too. So. All right, public comments? We have a lot.
How do you know you're first?
Can I have it?
Jimmy, do I leave this right here?
What is it?
Just point it up. Well, it's a microphone. He
Just-
gave directions and,
Okay. So tilt it up. So some people haven't
Hello.
commented before. So tilt it up. State your name and address for the record. If you're a teacher, you don't have to give us your home address. You can just say that you're a teacher in the district. That doesn't count. Well, I guess it could count for you.
no, it doesn't.
No? I would
My name
allow
is
it.
Adam Marcoux. I live at 4 Jalori Lane. I am the president of the Nashua Teachers Union, and I have a 5th grader who's going to middle school next year, and I have had a middle schooler before. I've also been a middle school student here, and my comments tonight are as the official representative of the NTU. I am the only person that can give the official representation of the NTU, so it's good that I'm going first. We do not have an opinion on this policy as of this evening. As you'll hear from the people here, there are comments and opinions on both sides of this discussion. I would reiterate what's been said already, that I feel that our teachers come forward with the best interests of their students from their perspective of what they think is best for kids. I haven't held my opinion back on how I feel about using one standardized test as the end all and be all. We fought this when it was attempted to put into teacher evaluation in this district, that we should not be focused on one data point. And I am concerned that, again, the SAS test gets all the glory, and I question its validity, frankly. We don't grade our kids on one data point. We're not actually allowed to by policy. So when we're looking at this globally, I think we take all of that into consideration. And ultimately, what's decided is decided and will be implemented by the board and the district, and we'll expect the membership to follow those policies as written. I would add that some of the discussion this evening of changes to schedules and such could result in a need to change contract language. Just to put that out front, I'm not sure based on everything that there would actually need to be any, but just to put that on the front burner, or the back burner actually. And moving forward with communication, and it was brought up by Ms. Johnson in communicating with parents, if there could be a global way that this is communicated, that all 3 middle schools are getting the same message at the same time. There are times that that happens, and there are times that not. I find that the times that they all get the same message from the same person at the same time is much more effective than other ways. I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and their opinions tonight as a parent who will have a middle schooler next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Catherine Collard.
Hi, Catherine Collard, Reashland Street. I have 3 children, aged 5, 4, and 3, and I taught high school science for 11 years, 9 in a neighboring public school district. The justification for eliminating honors classes is equity, from what I can tell. But in reality, I think the BOE is waging a war on merit. Eliminating honors level classes will lower the standard of achievement for all of our students. The majority of our middle schoolers, as we've discussed tonight, based on the SAS results, can neither read nor do math at grade level. Yet, in my opinion, this change will only exacerbate the problem because teachers would have to remediate for struggling learners on the one hand, while providing enrichment for the high achievers on the other hand. And out of necessity, I know we hope that this won't happen with good PD, but based on my experience, teachers will teach to the lowest common denominator. I know this because I did it. Furthermore, the minority of students who are actually proficient in reading and math, they're going to be bored out of their minds. This doesn't seem equitable to them. And just finally, the attachments that the district provided suggest that this proposal is best practice because it's aligned with the Association of Middle Level Education. I'd like to counter two assertions that I saw on that document, not the numbers, but just the pages with words. The first is that removing levels does not limit acceleration. It makes opportunities for that acceleration equitable. I think this is a lie. Its primary consequence is to limit opportunities for acceleration for our students who actually can perform at grade level. The second point that I'd like to counter is the statement that we want to provide all of our middle school students with the responsive, challenging, empowering, equitable, and engaging education that they deserve. Another lie. You clearly don't care about responding to, challenging, empowering, or engaging our highest achieving students. If you did, you would keep the honors level classes. If we enact this foolish policy here and nationwide, I think it's no wonder that parents are homeschooling in record numbers and pushing for school choice, because as much as we might like to think that this will work, it won't. And the public school monopoly is failing our students with destructive ideas such as this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth Collard.
Elizabeth Collard, 48 Fairmount Street. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm a teacher in a neighboring district. I'm in my 6th year of experience. I wanted to address the NHSAS because you asked if anybody would like to comment, and I was not called on. NHSAS in 8th grade and 5th grade tests in science, which is what
Oh, you have to.
Oh, do
You have to really, put your
Sorry.
face right in front of the mic.
Sorry.
That's okay. We just want to make sure we
I'm
can
a
all
hand
hear it.
talker and I didn't want to knock it. So I teach science, and in 5th grade and in 8th grade, they're assessed for science. Now, that is where I know the SAS test the best because that's the one that I've observed. Students don't need to know content in order to be successful for the science SAS test. But if they can't read, they can't find the pieces that are going to make them successful. Everything in a science NHSAS module is there. But if they're reading at a 3rd grade level in 8th grade, they're never going to be proficient. So that's the first thing I'd like to share. The second thing I'd like to share is that in New Hampshire, as kind of a general rule, we don't provide IEPs for gifted students. We don't even test them. We don't even know which ones they are, except for the grades that the teachers are giving to say, yes, this student deserves to be in algebra. So you really need to rely on your teachers' feedback. Both of the schools that I've worked in are inclusive, and that brings its own challenges. And I value your feedback on your experience with that teacher and you thinking that the teacher didn't care. But there could be other things in the background that's going on with that teacher, such as lack of administration support for those behaviors. Restorative practices probably wasn't a thing back then in reflecting and correcting. So I don't necessarily think it's a lack of caring, but teachers are burnt out. So when it comes to kids who are at foundation level, becoming a behavior problem, they're going to be a behavior problem whether you have honors kids in that class or not. And the honors kids are going to suffer because you can't teach because you're constantly addressing behavior. And in both schools that I worked where it was inclusive, this has been the case. You have to stop teaching and address the behavior. I do want to bring up level bias. teachers have it, parents have it, and kids have it too. And there are kids who are not at grade level reading or math, and they're inclusive with a classroom with a kid who's reading at a 10th grade level, and they feel stupid. And I hate to say it that plainly, but you can see it on their face. They don't understand what's going on. That kid answers every single question, and this kid is like trying to read the paper. No idea. And it's really not fair to the kids who in a leveled class are with their peers, where they feel, well, that kid is struggling with this too. So now I'm with people. I don't need to be embarrassed that I'm not proficient. I can now work to meet that. It really, I think that when you include everybody together, there are huge benefits. Data has shown you are going to raise up some kids in the middle who are below level. The kids who are at foundation, who are reading at 3rd grade when they come into 6th, this isn't going to help them unless you get them in a reading program. And so parents have bias. They see their kids are in foundation classes and they go, oh, my kid's in the dumb class. And that's not the case at all. And so I'm feeling that part of this push may be bias from the board or from parents all bringing forward. And I just bring that up as a concern. Kids on IEPs, they have disabilities. They are not unintelligent. They are totally capable, but we need to meet them where they are. If you throw a foundation kid in with an honors kid, they're both gonna struggle. And that's not equitable at all. That's equal, not equitable. And lastly, the correlation between poverty and proficiency is strong. Maslow's hierarchy says kids need these things. If they're not getting it, they're not going to do well. How are we going to meet the needs of the kids? They're going home without food, and they're going, I'm not going to do my homework. I'm hungry. That's all I can think about. So when you're looking at that case, you have to think about how we're going to support those kids. And I think that's about all I had. I just really, when my daughter comes to school, I want her to have the availability to do honors classes if that's where she is. If she's in foundations, then that's where she'll be. But I don't think that putting all of the kids together and expecting the honors kids to raise up the kids who can't read is fair to the honors kids at all. And that's my piece.
Thank you. Natalie Laflamme.
Hello. My name's Natalie Laflamme. I teach at Fairgrounds Middle School. I've been teaching for 38 years math. And I've served on the board of the math teachers board at the New Hampshire level. I've been to many conferences. I've done a lot of research in this area. I've done research in this area because I started my teaching career 38 years ago. We had a 7 through 12 school, a junior, senior high, where we leveled. We had 5 levels, and over the years, they were building a new middle school. And 6 years into my career, we were moving over to the new middle school. And I came from an honors classes as I went through schooling, and I was an advocate of leveling. I was a product of it. I was successful, and now I was teaching math, couldn't see how it could be done, not leveled. We were told, we're getting rid of leveling, jump on the bus or move along. We were given training. We were taught how to do it. I started it, still not a believer in it, didn't think it was fair to the honors kids, didn't think how I could move the foundations kids up. I stand before you today, a true proponent of getting rid of levels. I've done it both ways in math, and I cannot believe the difference in the kids. When you teach and give kids tasks that have low floor, high ceiling, everyone can learn, and everyone can learn math to high levels. You can have kids where you scaffold them to bring them along, and give them support. And then you can provide enriching opportunities for the kids that are at the high level. I have to do that in my honors right now because I have low performing honors kids and really high performing honors kids. So I already have to differentiate at the honors level. I would like to also talk to the question about why are our foundations kids or what the lower level kids, is the gap growing? Because we're going at a slower pace. If you're going at a slower pace to the kids that are already below level, you're widening the gap. That to me is just so clear. How are they going to catch up? Well, you put them in classes. You give them with other kids that are good learners. You put them in classes where they can see what a good student is doing. They can hear what a good student says. They can be involved in conversations in the classroom, maybe just listening, but it doesn't take long before they start participating too. When I differentiated my homework assignments, kids had the choice. I had my kids that were struggling math learners choosing the on-grade level math problems. I had my on-grade level math kids choosing the accelerated math problems and doing well a lot of times and not doing well other times, but they were choosing to learn and to push themselves and to challenge themselves. Lastly, I would just like to say, I've done a lot of research of this in the middle level. I have no idea about it at the high school level, but I know about it at the middle level. I know it from anecdotally, from my experience. When I came to Nashua and found out that they were leveled, no big deal, done this. And then I have my foundation kids come in. Miss, we don't get homework. We're foundations. We're not expected to do homework. This is too hard, miss. That is literally what I heard regularly. I still hear it today. Well, not in the foundations because we don't have the foundations, but still hear it. Oh no, I can't do that. I'm dumb. Well, no, you're gonna do it. And they do it. When the expectation is there, they do it. I'd also just like to end. I'm not alone in this, and other people have done far more research than I have. And the following boards have position statements out about getting rid of leveling up through 8th grade. National Council of Mathematics, National Education Association, National Council of Teachers of English, International Reading Association, Carnegie Commission, National Association of State Boards of Education, NCSM, I don't know what the acronym means, but it's a math leadership organization, National Science Teachers of Education, National Science Teachers Association, Education Commission of the States, Council for Basic Education, National Coalition of Advocates for Students, and Committee on Policy for Racial Justice. I think that's a pretty good list of people that know better than I do that think we should get rid of leveling. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Hoffman?
Hi there, my name is Karen Hoffman. I live at 38 Perham Street, right here in Nashua. For the board or audience, whatever, show of hands, who here speaks fluent Cantonese? Anybody? I don't see any hands up, so that's okay though. Let me ask you to envision this. You're an American kid, your family moves to China, your dad or your mom has a new business venture, whatever it may be. You go to a school there that doesn't have any sort of beginning, intermediate, advanced classes, things along those lines. The classes are only taught in Cantonese. No one knows any English there, so you're not going to get any help from anybody when it comes to, figuring out exactly what's going on around you. Now, let's say you're expected to take a literature test after you've been there a couple of weeks or so. And naturally, the test is only in Cantonese. No one knows any English there again. Do you think that you would do well on that test? all in Cantonese? I know I wouldn't. And I can tell you that, but why wouldn't we do well? And that's because we don't know any Cantonese. And at the very least, you would need to know some words, some basic Cantonese before you would even have a chance at answering even one question on that test. So the same goes for pretty much any subject. You need to know the basics and the fundamentals before you can move on to more advanced concepts. I taught in the Nashua School District. Granted, it was only for 1 year, 2021, 2022 school year. I was a K-2 special educator at Birch Hill, and I left for an assortment of reasons I won't get into. But being a special ed teacher, I worked with kiddos with an assortment of challenges and diagnoses, ranging from autism to Down syndrome to ADHD. And one concept most of my students needed additional reinforcement on was rapid letter identification. Again, this is kindergarten through 2nd grade. I worked with students all year, either one-on-one or in small groups, on letter identification. Earlier in the year, it was for longer periods of time within the classroom. Sometimes it was just for reinforcement, but we worked on it the entire year to make sure that they were fully fluent with this. By the end of the year, I still had 2nd graders that could not, with 100% accuracy, identify the letter A from the letter E. And we're going to put those kids in the same classes as kids, other 2nd graders, who are reading at a 5th grade level, a 6th grade level, a 10th grade level. It's unfair to everyone involved. And no teacher, no matter how seasoned, how gifted, is going to be able to adequately address the needs of 1 or 2 kids who don't know the A from the E when they have 25 other kids in their classroom who are reading on or above grade level. It's not doable. And if they do take the time to instruct those 1 or 2 children on those introductory concepts, instructional time will be taken away from the students who are on or above grade level, and moving on to the next topic will also be delayed. Part of the proposed no class levels concept is that students who are on or above grade level are going to be tasked with helping students to understand concepts that are too advanced for them to begin with. So essentially, there's going to be higher level students assisting and collaborating with the lower level students, right? And in addition to being responsible for their own learning, they're now going to be essentially responsible for assisting lower performing students for their learning as well. That's a lot of responsibility to place on these kids, honors level or not. And it's not fair to them. And in short, one must be able to know how to identify your numbers before you can add them. One needs to know how to add numbers before they are expected to be able to grasp algebra. It's just a fact. It's just how learning works. You need to know the fundamentals before you can advance. And leveling is an absolute necessity to ensure students understand those basics before moving on to advanced concepts. Leveled classes ensure students of all abilities can remain comfortable, motivated, and excited within their learning environment. To put these students in advanced level classroom environment without having a true understanding of the basics behind what they're learning, I can't imagine a more uncomfortable, demotivating, and demoralizing feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Hoffman?
Gary Hoffman, 38 Perham Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. First of all, I want to thank Natalie for just clearing one thing up in the beginning. We haven't had foundation classes in this district since about the pandemic. It's been a long time. What we're talking about here is the proposed policy change, and there are some good things, there are some bad things. I want to address really the policy changes in particular. But a couple of things that I just want to point out. Earlier it was mentioned, about the weighted GPA discussion. I watched those discussions on the board meetings, and I think a lot of those parents were upset because they weren't aware of that major change. This is another major change. And I do think it's important to let as many parents know as possible about this major change. Furthermore, because of that, the policy itself, it really just strikes the homogeneous grouping, letter D. It seems to give a lot of flexibility to the schools on how we choose to level and or choose to group the kids in general. To me, that piece, and for the middle school committee, we may want to flush out what that looks like. Is it going to be the teams that are going to be deciding the groups, or is it just going to be straight heterogeneous grouping? I would like to see some work around that. Mr. Posca mentioned that, if we do go to heterogeneous grouping, that there's going to need to be a lot of professional development and differentiation. There's another piece where I say, well, we should really think about going slow here. We have limited professional development time. We have a lot of our PD is geared towards English language learners, and we can't control that. So it's something to really be aware of. And the last thing I really want to talk about here is I'm an 8th grade teacher. I walk into the 6th grade wing sometimes, and I'm amazed at how different those kids are. And, I could understand perfectly why a 6th grade teacher might have completely different feelings about, the way their classes should be run versus like an 8th grade class. My kids, a lot of them look like high school students. When I go down to 6th grade, they're really, really young. And one of the things I do like about this policy is it still offers the opportunity for advanced courses in 8th grade. I was a kid that was really passionate about social studies. And, I used to watch CNN as a child and whatnot. I know it sounds really weird, but I would watch PBS at like 5 years old. I'd watch NewsHour and stuff. And I believe it or not, there are 8th graders that are like that, and they know that. And I would love the opportunity in 8th grade to teach a high school class in 8th grade. And if that is something that the middle school committee could look at, or we could investigate it, I think that would be a great opportunity. I also believe that there are, in 8th grade, those students that might also have similar feelings about maybe a science class or English. And we shouldn't just be targeting the kids that are interested in high-level math or foreign language. Kids have a lot of other interests, and I think by 8th grade, a lot of those kids are ready for that challenge. And as a district, we should take advantage of that letter G that you put in and really investigate maybe making some of those high school courses. So in sum, I would communicate this with the parents, let as many people know about this as possible and these potential changes, and if you are thinking about going pure to heterogeneous grouping, maybe, do it slow, give us time to do some PD, maybe start it in the 6th grade next year. And that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Sue Judici. Did I say it right? It'll only take you to be 6 years if you're coming to my meetings.
Hi, my name's Sue Judici, and I'm a retired teacher from the district. I worked for over 30 years at Fairgrounds Middle School, and I also taught in a couple of other states before I moved back to New Hampshire. This is such a divisive issue, guys, and I understand it, and we're all passionate. I have the utmost respect for Natalie, and we are in totally different ideas how this should roll out. I think we have to be very, very careful before we change this policy that we have an infrastructure in place. And that's one of the things about Nashua that drives me crazy, had driven me crazy, is the fact that, oh, this is a good idea. Research says this. Let's try it. No infrastructure in place, and let's just, fix it as we go. And that really isn't a real good idea. And I think that to have a solid infrastructure, if you're really going to go heterogeneous, which I don't agree with, but if you're really going to go heterogeneous, a couple of things I think that you need to look at. When the regular ed, I'm not talking about the kids with the IEPs or special needs or anything like that, but when the regular ed kids get to 6th grade, they shouldn't be 4 years behind grade level in math and science. You know, it's going to be a lot easier to enforce heterogeneous grouping if the kids are a little more homogeneously academically there. So I think it's really important that we have to also look at the elementary school, and when these kids move up, there is at least, you know, not this huge gap already. We're already fighting it when they come to 6th grade and they're that far behind. And the gap obviously is going to get larger. Also, I think we have to have, and you're going to have to look at it at some point, is discipline in this district. You have to look at it. You know, I had foundation level kids and extensions and honors, and I could have some of the worst behaving kids sometimes were in honors class. They weren't necessarily in the foundations level class. But I'm telling you, you don't send a kid out because you send a kid out of the room because they're misbehaving. Of course, not the first time, you warn them. You know, I try to cajole them. I try to be, you know, funny with them and that sort of stuff. And it usually worked. But sometimes the child needs a break, needs to get out of the classroom. You send them to the office, and in 10 minutes, there they are, back at your door, ready to, you know, come on in and, you know, do it again. There has to be some real discipline that these kids understand this isn't a joke. And I think that we're not willing to do that. We hurt their feelings. I'm sorry. Okay, so I mean, I think you really have to pay attention to that. And also, like several other people have said, if you really do go heterogeneous, there's a necessity for professional development. But I'm going to tell you, on Friday nights, Friday evenings, after the kids left, I was still at my desk at school, and I was differentiating. I had a different lesson plan for my foundation kids, a different lesson plan for my extension, and a different lesson plan for my honors. We're doing the same material, I mean the same subject, the same topic, but the way I approached it was different. Sometimes they had many of the same labs, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes I had to spend more time and not go as much in depth as I did with even extensions that I did with my honors. But I differentiated, but they were differentiated within their own classes, not me trying to run a 3-ring circus with all of them in one class. And that's, you know, and I'm not trying to be, you know, horrible about that, but I mean, my energy is only so much. And also, if you're gonna go this way, you're gonna need a para in a lot of the classes, you know? So think of it. I teach 5 classes or 4 if, you know, you change it up. I need a para. If I'm gonna have different groups going on, I'm gonna need a para in that class. Never mind the kids that come to me that already in their IEP says that they need a para. So, you know, that's infrastructure, guys. Are you willing? Are you ready? Can you do that instead of saying, try it? As far as the data and research is concerned, I've always taken data and research with a grain of salt because I can find as many articles as you guys can find on the benefits of homogeneous grouping as you can find on the detriments of homogeneous grouping. And so, you know, I have some articles that you could read and have that give you that information. So it's kind of like you kind of have to balance it. There was something else. Oh, and also, it makes me nuts when you say educational research says, and then, oh, we need to do this. Well, educational research supposedly told the Board of Ed several years ago, and Paula mentioned it, whole language approach. Oh my God, that was a debacle.
okay? But the educational research, the papers you read, said that's what you should do. So I think we really have to take that with a grain of salt. I was trying to look over the data on the SAS testing and all of the data that Mr. Plaska and the committee provided. I thought it was interesting, but you've got to realize that I think each school, someone mentioned this, I think each of the 3 middle schools do things a little bit differently. I think some of that data had nothing to do with leveling because some of the schools and some of the teams aren't really leveling. Okay, so I mean, you can't blame it on leveling if some schools, some teams are not leveling. And also, don't blame the level of proficiency on the fact that we've had homogeneous grouping for so long. You know, maybe when they get to middle school, part of the problem is they're a middle school kid. That's part of it. You've got to take into consideration they're not the elementary kids that sometimes want to please their teachers. They're the middle school kids that have got to show that their hormones are raging. So I think there's times that we have to, you know, with all of that data, that can't all be blamed on the fact that we've been homogeneously grouped. And please bear with me. Okay, as far as eliminating honors, the district statistics have shown that over the last maybe 10 years, we are losing kids, especially at the middle school level, because what their parents do is they take them out of the middle schools, and then many of them put them back into the high schools, okay? Where are we losing them? We're losing them at the middle school. Why? What type of kids are these that we're losing? They are the honors kids that we are losing. Because they're going to, what is it, ASD, and they're going to those types of schools. It is the honors kids, for the most part, percentage-wise, that we're losing, which is sad. Last night, there was a curriculum meeting and committee meeting, and there were kids from the mechanics class at the high school. I was so blown away by what they did and how they addressed the committee and how they told them and how enthusiastic they were about building this. It was like a walker, but it was so much more than that. And the district has been really good about trying to shore up the CTE program. And I think it's wonderful because not every kid is a college-bound kid. And what they're going to do is they're going to get out of high school, and in 5 years, they're going to be making more money than any of us, okay? And I'm telling you, it was. So we're shoring up the CTE for those students. We need to make, and I know they have all kinds of AP classes at the high school, and they really do a good job of that. But you know what? The interest is, you know, the interest can be sparked at the middle school level too. So let's, like Gary just said, let's maybe look at some courses, you know, in 8th grade that for these kids that really, really love science. And the other thing is, we don't have a REACH program anymore. I know, I'm hurrying up. We don't have a REACH program anymore. Okay, so once again, that level is getting, you know, kind of shafted a little bit. And you got to take that into consideration. And just anecdotally, because I think sometimes anecdotal information is a little more telling than all those stats you're trying to read through. When the district was starting and we were going to Aspen and we were putting our grades online and we had to learn all that information, they gave us PD. They sent someone down and we had to stay after school, and this person, we were all sitting at computers, this person was showing us how to log on and how to do this and that. Now, you had a variety of teachers. It was a cluster because some teachers couldn't even freaking log on, where other teachers are like, come on, come on, come on. And that's what can and will happen if you don't take this not seriously, if you don't take this and really do the foundation work that you need to.
Okay, thanks for listening to me. Oh, and I'm playing tennis with Serena Williams next week. She's probably not going to be happy about that.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you did bring up the curriculum committee meeting, and that is on YouTube now for anybody who wants to see. It was really cool. Lynn Rowe.
Hi, I'm going to be really fast, I promise. I'm Lynn Rowe. I teach at Fairgrounds Middle School. I also live in the district, and my 3 kids went through from K through 12, and they're becoming very functional adults. So our education here in Nashua does work. Definitely agree with detracking and leveling of the middle school. When educators discovered that tracking was detrimentally harming young adolescents, they were met with political, parental, and some teacher resistance. Some states and districts were able to pioneer through, and others have been stuck. Nashua is one of them, and it's time for us to reach every single student with every single standard and expect that each child can achieve high expectations. This has been an ongoing debate since the 90s, which is when I started my teaching career. In 1993, I started teaching 7th and 8th grade science in a Catholic school in the Bronx, New York. It was the hardest and most rewarding experience of my life. I think everyone should have the opportunity to teach in an inner city school for a time. When I moved to New Hampshire in '96, I was hired at Timberlane Middle School, where the principal was moving them from a junior high school to a middle school. So it was hard, people resisted, but he did what he was hired to do. And again, I had a rewarding experience. At first, I taught on a 5-person team in the 8th grade, where every class was leveled. It did not lend itself to great learning experiences for the kids and left me wondering if I was in the correct place. The following year, I was on a heterogeneous 2-person team with all of the EH kids, the emotionally handicapped kids, and it was awesome. It was amazingly fulfilling. The kids learned, they learned how to get along. It was fantastic. I then moved to Nashua School District in '98 and began teaching at Pennachuck. There, I was on another 2-person team in the 7th grade, and it was great. I was also part of Pennachuck when Paul Asbell was hired to change us to a middle school. I was then unfortunately rifted in 2010 to Fairgrounds, but have been very happy there ever since. So that's just a little bit about my experience. I feel like I have, brought 2 middle schools, from junior highs to middle schools, and I've seen the difference definitely firsthand. But I want to talk about what a middle schooler is. Like Sue said, middle school kids, they're surging in development in every aspect of the word. They are surging in physical, social, intellectual, and emotional growth, all occurring at the same time. Next to early childhood, birth to 5, this is the second most important time in their life. It is now that they're forming their beliefs about themselves, firming up their self-concepts, their philosophies, their values, and attitudes, which are ultimately determinants of their behavior now and the foundation of adult personalities. So this is serious stuff that we're, doing with them. And should anybody ever tell a 10 or an 11-year-old, you're not smart enough to be in that group? Because they know. They know who's in what group, and they understand. I have seen that on a child's face, and it's horrible and disheartening, and nobody should ever have the ability to do that to a child. Any type of level groups is wrong because there is no one true measure of a student's ability. This practice lends itself to inequalities due to race, class, and sex that exist throughout our society. Lastly, from the Journal of Evidence-Based Medicine, Ningru reviewed 4 decades of research on the effects of detracking reform. And his conclusions were, he studied 15 studies from 1972 to 2006. The findings suggest that the detracking reform had a positive effect on the low ability students and little to no effect on the average to high ability student achievement. 40 years of research. That was pretty impressive. The groundwork of research combined with my own 30 years of experience, mostly in middle school, scream for the practice of leveling to be gone once and for all. This is not about opinion. This is about what is best for kids. Like Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. So let's do better, Nashua.
Thank you. Monica Tino?
Hi, my name is Monica Tino. I am a teacher in the Nashua School District. I'm also a parent of 2 middle schoolers. I've been teaching middle school for over 25 years, experience in the classroom. I'm also certified as a principal and a curriculum administrator, and currently I serve as an instructional science coach in the district. And it's my experience in education, with my experience in education, I believe without reservation that placing students into homogeneously grouped classes is not what's best for our middle school students. In fact, I believe it is detrimental to their learning. First, teachers are put into unreasonable positions to judge their students. In my experience as a middle school teacher in Nashua, we make judgments about our students' achievement because of this policy, and therefore label our students. I never felt comfortable assigning levels to my students. There is no documented way to actually assess student achievement, but yet we're being asked to do it. We use recommendations from previous year's teachers, grades, effort, behavior, test scores, homework completion, attitude, and more to try to justify the level placement. I often wonder how the life of a student who almost made it into an honors class, level class, would be different if they had made it in. When we level middle school students, we affect their emotional well-being and their drive to learn. Students will meet you at your expectations. If you expect honors level work, that's what they'll give you. If you expect foundations level work, that's what they'll give you. This squashes the students' drive to learn and challenge themselves. It puts them in a place where there's a dictated ceiling rather than putting them in a place where the sky's the limit. When students are placed in a foundations level class, they know it. Students have told me they're in the dumb class. If you think you are dumb, would you try hard in school? Honor students also know which class they're in. In fact, they come to enjoy their status and will do anything to keep it, including stunting their own learning. They don't ask questions because they're the smart kids and they're already supposed to know the answer. That's a lot of pressure. The honors level class creates a learning community in which it is not okay to be wrong or not to know something. By not asking questions, the honors students are not learning to their full potential. Learning is asking questions. Learning is struggling to figure something out. These students are not learning to their full potential because they are afraid of losing their status. They are expected to be smart and know everything already. Why aren't we encouraging and challenging all of our students? The middle school level academic standards have changed and our instructional practices need to change too. As we move to competencies and standards-based learning, we are putting an emphasis on what students know, the concepts they learn and understand. Understanding can take place at many levels. This change to an emphasis on teaching concepts rather than skills makes the board policy on leveling kind of irrelevant. It does not matter if students in one class have varying skills, they are all given the opportunity to gain an understanding of the same concept dictated by the standards. Some may leave the class with a very deep understanding, while others might still be working on an understanding of the given topic. Heterogeneously grouped middle school classes create the best learning environment for students. It is in these classes that I had more students excel, more student participation, and more students challenging themselves. I've seen foundation students explaining things to honors students, and vice versa. I've seen honors students take on higher level and challenging projects, not just doing what will give them the A. These classes have rich discussions and students all have opportunities to grow as individuals. I love teaching middle school. This level policy is just unfair. These kids are too young and too impressionable to be labeled for the rest of their academic careers. Please consider shutting the book on this policy and opening it for our middle school students. I also want to add, just there's been some discussion about reading tonight and kids' reading levels, and we know that there's a crisis with reading right now, and how we've been teaching reading and how we're learning about teaching reading and how we need to do a little bit better with that. 20% of people, it's estimated, have dyslexia, which means that reading is very difficult for them. Recognizing the sound, putting the letters of the sound of the word with the written expression, they have a very hard time doing, and with some therapy, they can get better at it. But just because somebody didn't read because they have dyslexia, or somebody didn't learn how to read because they were in and out of school, or for whatever reason, doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to all the science and all the social studies and everything else that all the other students have access to. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Michael Allen.
Hello, Michael Allen, teacher at Elm Street Middle School. I've been teaching in the district for 10 years now, and I had the privilege a few years ago before the pandemic of doing 2 separate teacher leader projects about leveling in our middle schools. In 2018, we administered a survey to our students about school climate and culture and what they were learning in class. And one of the beautiful things about middle schoolers is they're very happy to tell you what they think. And they're honest about it. In our survey that we gave in the spring of 2019, we found that our students in the different levels had very different experiences in our middle school. The honors kids thought that they were being challenged, they had high expectations, their teachers were giving them engaging, thoughtful lessons, and that they were being challenged, and the school was awesome. But our students in our foundations recognized that it wasn't the same for them, that the expectations were lower. They were not asked to do challenging critical thinking assignments. They were not challenged to do interdisciplinary work. They were not the expectations for them were not the same. And when I see kids walk in my room today, they say, "Oh, I'm not smart. I don't write full sentences. I'm not smart. I don't do homework." And that's been my experience over my time here in Nashua. The testing scores. Middle schoolers are middle schoolers. They're hormonal messes. They are a bundle of joy. You never know which kid is walking into your room. There's going to be disengagement during the middle school time. It's not surprising, and that's reflected in the test scores. But by having them leveled, we're accelerating that disengagement, because they're testing in 3rd grade at a reasonable level. And then by 8th grade, they've fallen off a cliff because they're all done with school. I'm dumb, I can't read, I don't write, I'm not going to do it. Leveling is accelerating that disengagement and creating a situation in our schools where they are not challenged to reach the standards that are being shown on that test. We're cheating a large portion of our population out of the opportunity to learn and succeed. We need to get rid of leveling. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I know we didn't actually have public comments on the agenda, but I'm going to say this ends the public comment period. It's got to follow the letters. So that brings us to our work here on the committee. I'm going to make a motion that we send IMDb middle level education to the full board so that the full board can consider it.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Darling. Did anyone have any further discussion, having heard the public comments or any further questions for admin before we vote? Ms. Darling.
I would like to validate every person that said they are middle schoolers when it comes to the SAS testing. As soon as my son found out how important those numbers were to the school district, he has bombed every single test since, intentionally. For any of you who have met him, you know that he is determined when he wants to be. But I just want to say thank you to everybody that took your time. I was actually really surprised at how many of you came out and said, like, no, get rid of leveling. I was expecting it to be the opposite. So thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and it's nice to hear 2 sides of this whole issue here. I think there's a, and if you take away whether we're going to keep leveling or not, I think the problem is in foundation, we're not challenging our students no matter what, no matter what. So even if you were going to keep the leveling, there's a real problem there. I think that there's other things that we have to, I've took pretty good notes here as everybody's speaking. I wish I learned shorthand when
Paula?
I was in school.
You're not picking up on the
Okay,
mic.
so I wish I learned shorthand when I was in school. It would have been a lot quicker. But I was one of these kids that didn't like those things. I think there's a lot of things that we need as a district to clean up. Before you go on to something new, you need to clean up what you have here. Our honest, like I said before, our honest students, we have to challenge them, but they're good at what they do. And yeah, they can help a lot of the foundation students and the extension students, but we have to help them first. And we have a lot of gaps here. So whether we level or we don't level, we need to bring up the bar and make foundation students be able to be challenged more and the extension students here. And I thank everybody for coming in and bringing all this to our attention, because as a board, we don't go into the classrooms. We can't see what's happening. And it's great that Mr. Hoffman and myself and even his wife agreed with me with a lot of things. Who would think, you know? And he so did, I know, I think, I know. And even Mr. Marcoux, to a certain extent, he mentioned my name. So, I mean, it's going to be a good evening. But again, I want to thank everybody for coming in.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Regan, did you have something?
Oh, no, I don't. No, thank you.
So I just want to say that 6 years ago, when this came to policy committee, I was exactly on the other side of the argument from what's being proposed tonight. I was like, no, we have to. I was an honors kid. I was like, I grew up in Virginia. In Virginia, they identify you in the 4th grade. You're either gifted or not gifted. And if you're gifted, you immediately skip classes. And sometimes there's a special school. I'm a kid who skipped 8th grade. And I thought, we need to make sure that this still happens. And then I had middle schoolers go through the process. And I've really been paying attention to what happens in the schools and been paying attention to the research. And for me, my big concern is that as a district, the Department of Justice report has really illustrated some of the cracks in our foundation. And a lot of those cracks are kids of color and immigrants and kids who are learning English. And I can't continue to stay the course. I just can't. 6 years ago, I thought, well, we can just build up the bottom and leave the top alone. And that hasn't worked. And the more research I do, the more I feel like we said that in 2008, we said it in 2014, we said it in 18, and now it's 2023, and our gaps are getting wider. And so for me, I feel like I can't kill it at this level. We have to move forward with something different. And I really appreciate all the work that the teachers have done, because we are not educational experts on the board. Like, I don't know, like, I have to listen to you guys. And so the fact that 22 teachers and educators came together and really did a deep dive and looked at Nashua and did all that hard work and put together something to ask us to make changes, I feel like we have to honor that. So for me, I'm a yes. Let's send so the motion is to send IMBD to the full board as presented. So I'm a yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's 3-0. It'll go to the full board. The next full board meeting is on November the 27th. So, yeah, and then housekeeping, I think we will have a December policy meeting. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. December will be some legislative updates, things that we have to do because laws were signed this summer. And then speaking of teacher work, our teachers have been working on an artificial intelligence policy, which was reviewed by the New Hampshire School Board Association, and they loved it. And so I'd like to bring that forward in December and share it with everybody. And it's not, no, you can't use artificial intelligence. It's really about how do we incorporate new tools into our educational practice. So, on everybody. All right. Any other questions?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, Ms. Darling motions to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Lamper. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned at 8:03. 8:04.